What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Planet Soccer Podcast. Today, we are talking about some middle school level drama with the U.S. men's national team. Dylan, I played youth sports growing up. I know you played youth sports growing up. My parents were never like this. I don't know if yours were, but I knew kids who had parents that were the call the coach after the game, complain to the coach, just make scenes, yell at their kids on the field, do all of the immature stuff that we associate with youth sports, especially like competitive travel youth sports. I would say that happens a lot in, which, I mean, that's what this story kind of goes back to. These two adult men, Greg Berhalter and Claudio Reyna, who grew up playing soccer together. Their families have known each other forever. Over the course of this week, they've developed kind of this middle school feud. And it all stems from a situation that happened when Greg was in college. I'm sitting here talking about this. This is kind of the first time we've done like a legit reporter almost kind of episode. I feel a lot of pressure to really get everything right. But guys, basically what has happened is the United States men's national team soccer Twitter account released a statement talking about allegations against Greg Berhalter being investigated, yada, yada, all this. I don't want to downplay the situation. I'm just saying yada, yada to paraphrase informally. I sent it to Dylan because I had heard nothing about any sort of investigation, allegations, anything. And you were like, what the heck? And I think you go ahead and take it from here because you texted a buddy who knows kind of more about USMNT. Like, what did you kind of hear when this week started? And we'll tell y'all exactly what happened when we get to the climax, but just kind of give you all the frame of the week, Dylan.
Yeah, it was kind of the same thing that you and I both said. I reached out to him on Twitter, sent it to him through like a DM. Super, honestly, just a Twitter friend, not somebody I know personally.
We all have
somebody
them.
I met on Twitter. He's a Newcastle and USMNT fan and super tied into USMNT. Like he's my go-to for like all thoughts, opinions that are above my head and above my pay grade for USMNT. And even he was like, excuse me.
They just dropped the statement on us.
Like we're and the way the statement was written too was like, oh yeah, it started December 11th when it was reported.
It's like a month ago, guys.
Reported. Like what are we talking about? But it was like super casual the way part of that statement was written. So I was like, same thing you thought, same thing he thought. Like what did I miss? Did I like miss a news cycle? Was I in like a food coma over Christmas and they like did some sneaky drop on us? Like, I don't know, but it was the first anything had been reported on. And it has been a wild and wacky, 4 days now since that first came out. There was, to backtrack a little bit, Berhalter's contract ran out on December 31st at 11:59, 59. And we didn't hear anything for the first 2-3 days of the new year. And people were like, is he getting renewed? Is he not getting renewed? And then on Monday, which was the 3rd, this comes out and it's like, oh, this is why we haven't heard anything. And we still haven't really heard anything about going forward who our coach is going to be for the camp coming up. It was just named as an assistant coach will be running it, which is to be as expected. They're not, even if he is gone, they're not going to fill the position that quickly because all of this is going on. But I'll let you, you most recently read, I did a bit of reading on this yesterday, but you found a really good article that kind of has a timeline of the story. So I'll kind of let you take it away and kind of dive in.
So Greg Berhalter, obviously, who we're talking about is the head coach of the men's national team. He attended the University of North Carolina with Giovanni Reyna's mother, I believe. They became friends in 1991. There was
go ahead. Even further back, Claudio and Greg played youth soccer together. Yeah. They were on the same high school team. I don't believe Claudio went to UNC, but you're right. His future wife went to UNC. Yeah, thank you. Berhalter and Reyna's future wives both went to UNC. And probably maybe met. I don't know if they met through the Berhalter and Claudio being buddies or not, but they knew each other prior to college. Yeah. And then he attended UNC and both wives attended UNC.
There was an incident in college outside of a bar where, in Greg's words, there was a heated argument with him and his now wife. And I think what ended up happening was he kicked her in like the shin or something like that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
Obviously there's no video. I don't know what the context was. He says heated argument. Who knows? It happened, and Claudio Reyna's now wife knew about it, and apparently has just been kind of holding on to that memory for 30 years. Um, it's so hard to provide all the context for this story because, like you said, these families go back so far. Claudio Reyna is a U.S. men's national team legend, more so than Greg for sure. Many consider him to be like the best player the U.S. has had before the Donovan Dempseys of the world, and they crossed over a little bit, but essentially, let's fast forward to today a little bit, if that's okay. Do you have anything else from the past? That was kind of the incident from the past.
Yeah, the only other like tiny tidbit is Berhalter's hiring for many reasons was thought to be, you know, inside job isn't the right word, but kind
Nepotism.
of
Yeah.
nepotism-esque because of some family ties, but also this was part of it too. People knew, you know, Claudio had a young son who was up and coming and the next great thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a whole lot around the families and Greg, positively, Greg being
Yeah.
Gio's coach
Yes.
originally. So it was all positive vibes initially. They were both very excited. Claudio is, I believe he runs Austin FC, and was very excited when Berhalter was hired. So he's still very involved in the soccer community and was all in on Berhalter's hire at first. So it just has some context that they've always been close, like up until they weren't most recently, and that's just what makes this all the weirder and
Yep.
all the more unsettling.
It started as, Greg being an extremely positive, sort of perceived to be an extremely positive influence for the future of Gio in his USMNT career. Let's kind of go through a timeline of events over the last 2 months. So November 9th, the USMNT announces their World Cup roster. Gio's on it, despite kind of coming back from an injury. It feels like he's always coming back from an injury at this point.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Ricardo Pepi situation, which is completely different. He said on a podcast that Greg told him he just hung up the phone, didn't say anything else, which whatever. That was November 9th. The 21st, the U.S. kicks off versus Wales in the World Cup. Gio Reyna is nowhere to be found, despite the U.S. really needing some offensive firepower in that game, lacking offensive firepower in that game. The riff within the Twitter community starts. We don't know, was it after that game or after the England game where Gio was like, and it was after the Wales game where somebody asked him, were you available? Are you hurt? And Gio said, I'm definitely available. And that kind of pissed Greg off a little bit. I think I never saw where he said that. Maybe it was in an unrecorded interview, just like to a written reporter. But that happened. And then versus England, Reyna actually made his World Cup debut off the bench. He logged 7 minutes in that game in a scoreless draw. The 29th, U.S. versus Iran, and really what was a must-win game. Berhalter opted to keep Reyna on the bench for the whole game. During the 1-0 victory, which we discussed that at length. We actually think it might have been an okay move because you weren't down or it wasn't a draw. But I would have started the game with him probably in a must win.
Right. Yeah.
December 3rd, the U.S. is eliminated by the Netherlands. They go home December 3rd. December 6th, I want to say, let me look over. Yeah, December 6th.
He did play 45 minutes in that game.
Yeah.
That was his only other appearance. He did have 2 appearances, total 40 or
2 appearances
50,
for 52 minutes, and only 2 shots taken. So December 6th, Greg Berhalter is speaking at the Howe Institute for Society Summit on Moral Leadership. That's a mouthful. In New
and a little ironic as we move forward.
Because he will be a case study on how not to do that in the past. It's just 3 days after the U.S.'s elimination, so he got back from Qatar, probably really jet lagged. It's not an excuse for his comments whatsoever, but he revealed that an unnamed player was nearly sent home due to commitment issues. The quote was, "In this last World Cup, we had a player that was clearly not meeting expectations on and off the field," Berhalter said. One of the 26 players, so it stood out. As a staff, we sat together for hours deliberating what to do with his player. Push comes to shove. Apparently, they have a team meeting, which was then said to have never taken place, like a vote to keep him or send him home, which Forgot what player came out and said that never happened. Gio stayed at the World Cup. Yeah, at the end of the day, this apparently was settled internally. Those comments don't come out publicly until December 11th. Social media, it's weird in this day and age. It takes 5 days for social media to pick up on something.
Right, because there were people at that speaking engagement that I'm surprised it didn't make its way to Twitter until the 11th, but it did. I don't know if it was some great PRing.
I'm sure they like had people keep their phones put up so nobody could like record it and
exact word for word.
So December 11th, his comments are made public. On December 12th, Gio apologizes because I forgot how it came out that he was talking about Gio. Do you remember, Dylan?
I think it was just a reporter or something just kind of broke it. We all kind of knew, so I feel like that's why I don't remember it really being that big, because like as soon as the comments came out, before it was like known it was Gio, people were like, "Oh, this is about Gio. It has to be about."
Gio. I'm reading here actually. It never came out that it was Gio. Gio just came out with a statement, an apology, essentially. He saw Twitter, he saw the writing on the wall, and he's like, "All right, I need to say something."
Right.
Yeah.
They know. Everybody's on to me.
So that's December 12th. Gio Reyna apologizes. We go into the holidays. Christmas, all that. Like Dylan said, Berhalter's actual contract expired the 31st. We recorded an episode talking about the next USMNT coach, which I'm actually going to post in conjunction with this one, speculating on who the next coach will be. So y'all can listen to that. But the 31st came and went. And I think I might have texted you on New Year's Day and been like, so are we hearing anything? On the 3rd, that was Tuesday. Was the 3rd? Yes. Monday. Right? You're right. Yep.
Tuesday.
Monday.
Yeah, Monday, Tuesday.
This Monday. So we're recording this on Thursday, the 5th. On Monday, the 2nd. I'm sorry, Monday, the 3rd. The USSF announces an investigation. Berhalter took to social media to share the details of the 1991 incident that was in question that we mentioned at the beginning of this episode. When I said, we were like, what is going on? We didn't know there was an investigation. Well, turns out that allegations were made on December 11th. Does that date sound familiar? It should, because that's the day that Greg's statements came out about Gio. The USSF announced that there was an investigation going on into potential inappropriate behavior towards multiple members of our staff by individuals outside of our organization. It's just a weird thing to say, honestly. It's super vague, kind of confusing. In the 4th.
The first time I read it, and very clearly not how it is, but like I think I even texted you and then like retracted it shortly after, like, wait. This started with Greg doing this thing in 91, but it sounds like he's done more since. But it wasn't saying he has done things to the staff. It was people outside of the organization have mistreated our staff. And like that is not how I read that. And I don't think I'm the only one that read it incorrectly the first time. That was like a relatively... That's why you should read things twice before you
don't just read the headline.
Text. But that was like a common misconception at first that got cleared up pretty quick from people rereading it. But at first people were like, oh man, like if this is more systemic thing with Greg, like he's got to go. Like feel bad that 91 got brought up, but he's got to go. And we were wrong in reading it that way. But yeah, like you said, it was a weirdly written statement that led to some confusion, I think, initially.
The way I kind of took it is that this investigation into that matter brought other things to light through the investigation, which I don't think is what was the case.
Right.
January 4th, yesterday, this thing explodes. I mean, violently explodes.
There was a soccer reporter at like 11 o'clock on Tuesday that was like, buckle up, like it's about to boil over tomorrow. And I was like, oh no. And he was very right, because it was been a crazy 2 days.
Yes. So in the last 24 or 35-ish hours, like 4 people involved have, I think Berhalter's wife might have issued a statement through somebody else. Greg issued a statement. Both Reyna parents issued a statement. Essentially what happened was, you know what? I'm still even unclear on who originally like brought up the 91 incident. Was it Claudio or was it his wife? I don't know. Somebody in the Reyna family, but Claudio took it to the next level.
Because it was very clearly reported initially by ESPN that it was
Yeah.
Claudio. Then Yahoo came out and said it was his wife. So like you said, I don't know if anybody really knows. ESPN has since changed it to it was his wife initially. So I think it's starting to get cleared up that she initiated it. But like you said, it did not stop with that
Regardless of
initial
who
report.
initially reported it, Claudio doubled down. He tripled down, and he said, "I'm friends with so and so." I forget who's the guy. He like runs U.S. Soccer or something. He basically just throwing around a bunch of my buddy this, my buddy that, nepotism stuff that got Greg hired in the first place. They're name dropping people and saying, "I was just trying to bring it to this guy's attention." Well, if you bring up a 30-year-old domestic violence case to the president of U.S. Soccer, whoever it was, somebody very high up, what'd you expect to happen? Like it was, it and I'm not downplaying the incident. Obviously they've gotten married since then, so they worked something out. And I don't think it's happened since, or we haven't learned that it has.
And by no means does that make it okay. And I feel so bad that I feel bad for Greg, but I'm like, man, this happened 30 plus years ago. Like, yes, what he did was wrong, undoubtedly. But if we all were held to things that we did at 18, everybody would be looked at different. Like you grow. And it sounds like from his wife's statement and his statement, they've grown together.
They've gone to counseling.
He sought out, he sought out individual counseling. They went to counseling together. So like he took it very seriously. And again, the mistake is not excusable, but I applaud anybody who realizes their mistake and tries to better themselves for it. And from that aspect, I do think it is a little bit unfair that it is being dragged up 30 years later, especially why it's being dragged up.
Guys, this is a result of Gio not playing in the World Cup.
This is literally JD McCoy, Friday Night Lights. Like, I don't know if people remember that show, but like Claudio looks like JD McCoy's dad in that show. And that is not a look you want. Like you said, we all went to high school and played high school sports with at least one person who had a parent like this. So anybody who played high school sports at minimum can relate to some of this experience and what has happened. But seeing it on this stage, on a professional stage, because at the end of the day, they're not getting paid billions to play international soccer, but it is still very lucrative to play for a men's national team and coach a men's national team. So these are all professional athletes and coaches, and we're dealing with things like this is JV football, and they want their kid to start at quarterback, and like it's sad, and it is a state of American soccer. It is a whole much bigger issue than just this one incident, in my opinion. But it is a very bad look for Gio. If you're Gio, going to be very difficult walking into that dressing room in January if you're invited. Probably won't be invited in January. Probably wouldn't go even if he was, because club is bigger. But whatever the next camp he does go to and is invited to, showing up is going to be very uncomfortable, whether the players back him or not. I know all of his Dortmund teammates initially back in December backed him. He doesn't seem like a guy who would sit stuff out or not try. So maybe his countrymen will look at it the same way and put aside his dad's choices and decisions, but it will undoubtedly be uncomfortable for a little while for him, all because his dad thinks he runs U.S. soccer.
Yeah,
it's really a shame. I really feel bad for Gio too. If he was being a pouty brat at practice, I don't feel bad for him getting benched. I feel bad for him having his parents do this though, because it's incredibly embarrassing.
Yeah, sure. Regardless of what happened during the World Cup and Gio's attitude and whatever incidents took place, this was unfair to him for his parents to do. There's a Reddit. I've become a big Reddit fan. I use it for research, all kinds of stuff. Well, there's a subreddit. It's called AITA, and that stands for Am I the Asshole? And basically, people give situations that are going on in their life, and they're like, "Am I the asshole?" And people will tell them in the comments, and then they'll mark that comment thread as yes, the asshole, or no, the other person is, essentially. In this situation, I don't know. I really don't. So like Greg speaking at a leadership conference, he doesn't name a player that had issues at the World Cup. Sure, it was fresh on everybody's mind, but hey, he's speaking at a leadership conference and talking about how he handled this, you know? Maybe he could have been more vague and been, I was coaching sometime at a big tournament and we had a player. Everybody's going to know it was
Yeah.
the World Cup. I mean, yeah, I'm like, okay, maybe Greg just don't use that example, but it's fresh on his mind. We all have recency bias. So I don't know, man. I just, and the Reynas are absolutely assholes in this situation. Way
I
too
was gonna say,
emotional.
yeah, we know who the
Yeah.
biggest
Yeah.
one is, and it's definitely his parents, both of them. It's like
Yeah.
it sounds like now that his mom kind of somewhat initiated it. I guess certainly say it's both of them. I think in hindsight, Greg probably wishes he was a little more vague, like you said. In one of my coaching stops, this thing happened. This is how I handled it, especially being
Yeah.
so fresh. If it was in 2026 and he wasn't coaching the men's national team at that time and wanted to even name drop Gio Reyna, I don't even know if I care
Mhm.
at that point. But because of the recency, because he said 4 days ago, this is what was happening. We all knew what was going on, and I think by no means does that excuse the Reynas, but I think this whole thing may have been avoided if he would have been a little bit more vague and not shared such details. And I think that's why I find it kind of ironic that he did it at a leadership morals, because like I'm guessing, maybe not, but I'm guessing at your company, if you're in a meeting with a one-on-one with your manager, they would say, this one of our team members struggled with X, Y, and Z. Do you know how to handle this situation, or whatever? And wouldn't say who the individual is. You might know in the back
Yeah.
of your head, but making it as not obvious as possible is what most good leaders and managers would do, especially speaking
Mhm.
externally. So that from that aspect, it was a little bit disappointing from Greg, but by no means does he deserve anything that has happened since
Yeah.
then. That is like the one and only thing he's done wrong. I don't think he was wrong in benching Reyna. If Reyna was kind of that, whiny brat about not playing, by no means do I think he was wrong to feel betrayed by a friend and practically a family member. In the Reynas. So I feel terrible for Greg. I do think, unfortunately, if he was going to continue as coach, I do think it is less likely now. I think it will be more of a way that is mutually agreed upon, because I think it would be really hard for him to step back into the locker room at this point as well. I think there was already enough questions surrounding team selection, lineup selection, that the media and the outside noise may have already gotten to the players a little. But then you throw some drama like this, like you got to start
Yeah.
fresh. It sucks. Greg was exciting when we hired him. I think I was defending Greg longer than most. I saw his flaws, but I still, at the end of the day, didn't hate him like other people did. So it's unfortunate it's going to go out on what's probably not ideal terms for him. It is really a shame, and I do really feel bad for him. And hope he lands on his feet and tears it up in the MLS or something again, because I do think he has good coaching qualities. I just don't think it's going to be with the U.S. men's national team again.
Let me present an opinion real fast, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think the U.S. men's national team also needs to take some blame. We didn't know that this was going on. Why? Unless there was chatter that we just weren't hearing about, why did they even need to release the statement? Like, because, and I want to tell you why I say that. Gio Reyna's mother said, at the time I called Ernie, many people were trashing Gio on social media due to Greg's comments, and I didn't know when or if this would stop. I just wanted Ernie to help make sure that there would be no further unwarranted attacks on my son. First of all, Ernie's not going to stop the
They're
Twitter mob.
warranted,
This sounds
right?
like something that Ernie, the Reynas, and Berhalter needed to get together in a room and say, guys, cut it out. Cut it out.
Smoke the peace pipe and
Yes.
let's move on.
I don't
Yeah.
know if the statement was necessary. Now, context, U.S. soccer's had a really bad year. Public relations go and with everything surrounding just, the
The
women's
women's
game
game, and not just directly tied to
right.
U.S., but just soccer in
Yes.
the U.S. has not had a good
So
12
maybe they
months.
wanted to get out in front of it. But I mean, I think everybody, this will be taught in like sport management classes in 20 years, this whole situation. And what an immature thing to say. At the time I called Ernie, many people were trashing Gio on social media due to Greg's comments. I want people to trash Planet Soccer Pod on Twitter. That
What
yeah,
what are those TikToks with
yeah.
people playing the
World's
violin?
smallest
Like, yeah, I'm
violin,
sorry,
baby.
lady.
That's yeah,
Like, I'm sorry, lady. He's a professional athlete, and he was being a crybaby, and people
yep,
found out. In that case, I wouldn't go to Ernie. I would, if you're friends with Greg, go to
hmm
Greg. Say, hey man, I don't appreciate how you handled this. I thought we were closer than this. Wish you would have kept it under
yeah.
wraps a little better. And just moved on. And but from that aspect, I think there was probably issues before December 11th between the
Sounds
two
like it.
families. And I don't know, a lot of speculation. But if you're really as good as friends as everybody's acting like they were leading up to all this, like we all have other couples we're friends with. If I was in this situation with them, I wouldn't go public until I talked to them
Yeah,
multiple times. And even then, I still probably wouldn't out of decency to them. But like, it didn't seem like there was any non malicious attempts to resolve this. It was you are making people be mean to my son, so I'm going to try and get you in trouble. And like that's
yeah,
embarrassing. But from the US Soccer Federation perspective, I agree. I hadn't really thought about that angle of it. Um, I think part of the reason they likely came out with a statement is because people were asking questions about Greg's
that's true.
contract, and
Actually,
they
yeah, that
kind
is
of
very true.
they're
This is
like,
why.
how vague can
Yeah,
we be while still saying why we haven't made a decision? Because like it doesn't look good if people think you're just stringing Greg along. It doesn't look good if you've secretly told him he's not being renewed, but you're not man enough. I hate using that
yep,
terminology, but you're not man enough to say it publicly. Like I, I think they almost had to release something. So I kind of get it from that perspective because as we said, we spent 2 or 3 days like, what's going on with Greg? Is he here? Is he not? So um, it could have been we are reviewing the situation. Um, the January coach will likely be our assistant at
yeah,
this time. We're currently reviewing the situation or something and been even more vague. But then that would have stirred up a whole other like. So they got put in a really tough spot. But I do think they probably could have handled it a little bit better than the statement they ended up
yeah.
releasing for sure.
They today they or yesterday they announced that Anthony Hudson would lead. And, we haven't even mentioned the reason all this kind of timing was felt a little bit rushed and just sort of like really sudden is because we've got friendlies coming up later this month against two World Cup teams. Or wait, is it Ecuador or Colombia?
It's
Colombia. Never mind then.
Columbia, I
So
think.
Serbia and then Colombia. So Anthony Hudson he'll work as the head coach for this round of U.S. friendly. So I think if there hadn't been friendlies this month, I don't know if I think the U.S. probably could have gotten away with just saying, "Look, we're not rushing into anything. We're just we're
Right,
feeling
exactly.
things out."
We're
Yeah,
meeting with Greg. We're looking into it, and we all go, huh? U.S. Federation being U.S.
hmm
Federation again can't make real decisions. But that's
yeah,
all we would have said. It wouldn't have been this like media shitstorm. Sorry, YouTube. If it wasn't, as we both said, impending games and
yeah.
camp coming up.
So that's kind of the context of the timing of the situation. I'm with you. I don't think there's not that Greg can't come back from this. I just don't think anybody in this situation is able to come back from this,
Right?
except
Yeah.
for maybe Gio because he wasn't directly involved
Yeah.
in the bickering. He's directly involved, obviously, but the going back and forth between adults. I
And
mean, that's not him. And plus, he's what, like 20. So
and he's the least
yeah,
replaceable. Like there's a lot of coaches that could coach the same. Like again, I'm not trying to rag on Greg here, but there's a lot of coaches that could do exactly what Greg
yeah,
did in the World Cup. There just is. There's not a lot of guys that can do what Gio Reyna does
yeah,
on the field, even if he's only trying 75%. There's not a lot of Americans that can do what he does, so he'll be fine. There was like a half hour of panic for me. I'm like, oh my god, what if Gio never plays for us again? Like, what if he just retires from international football and like he can't? He could maybe get a FIFA waiver because they've changed those rules to like switch country. So I went through like a half hour panic attack, and I'm like, he's not going anywhere. The people that are most affected are sadly going to be Greg, and definitely the Reynas in the public
yeah. No
perception.
kidding. I will say, speaking to Reina's role and how other coaches would handle him, I've been a big book reader recently. I'm going to tell our audience that I've read 2 soccer books recently. One was Inverting the Pyramid, talking about just the evolution of tactics in soccer and how the number 10's kind of going away in a lot of systems. You don't see a true number 10 anymore, which is what Gio is. Now, he's a very versatile player with a very wide skill set that can play a whole lot of different positions adequately. And if you really teach him, he can easily move to the wing, or I think he can even move up top, kind of in more of a false 9, but still play that striker.
Yeah.
So he is in a little bit of a difficult position with being so young and not being forced to try new things. But I think this whole situation is going to be a wake-up call for Gio. If he takes it to the level of maturity that I think he should, this is all hopefully going to be better for him in the long run. His reputation will take a hit, but something his mom needs to realize is the news cycle today, nobody's going to remember this in a month.
Right.
And if his mom had realized that, we wouldn't be here. Like, you know, so
we would have forgot about it by the Messi would have won the World Cup, and we would have forgot. Like you and I watched and talked about the World Cup ad nauseum. We would have forgotten by the time Messi won the World Cup that this happened until we got into the next U.S. tournament, until we got to the next Gold Cup or qualifying. We would have been, oh yeah, that was weird, that whole Gio thing. He didn't play. And well, move on. He wasn't trying hard. Hope he tries hard now. And it's done. That's it. He gets bashed for 2 days on Twitter and wipe your hands of it, and we move on. And now we're going to be talking about this a whole month after the Greg. I mean, since he's actually said anything, we're getting pretty close to a whole month after he actually said anything. So very poor management, parenting decisions on their part, man. It made a bad situation a horrific situation.
It really did
for them.
You know, I would consider you and I very like in tune to the soccer world, and especially U.S. soccer, and we follow it probably more, at least as much, if not more, than all of our friends. And we had already forgotten about any of the Greg Gio stuff, like you just said. You know, so it was forgiven, forgotten. Drop that shit. Come on, parents. Be
he's
better.
20. I hope he tries harder next time. Is all U.S. soccer was thinking if you asked them on January 1 about Gio. Hope he tries harder under a new coach, or hope him and Greg get it figured out, and let's go at it again next year in the Gold Cup. Like that's all it would have been. And now we just spent a half hour talking about how stupid his parents are and how it kind of does suck for Greg, because I do think it'll be the end of Greg as our coach. But I do really, really hope I will be following, not closely, like watching all the games, but I'll be following whatever team he ends up at, because I really do think he deep down is a good guy and a pretty solid coach, and it's just a really unfortunate situation for him.
Yeah, definitely is. You know, I mean, it's a good transition into the episode that I'm going to kind of stitch together with this one. Dylan and I, like I said, we discuss potential candidates. Some are up in the clouds. Like we're talking stratosphere above the level that this job is. Several of them are very realistic. One of them is a Premier League coach. I'm sure you can guess who that is. He is American, the only American Premier League coach. But that's coming up right after the break. Dylan, do you have anything else on this situation?
Yeah.
It needs to be put to bed, people. It was put to bed. Parents, be better. But when it comes to your kids and their sports, just be better. That's it. We appreciate you guys listening. We hope this kind of style of episode, it was a little more like hard hitting than we do a lot. So I think we were well prepared, and we appreciate you guys listening, and give us your thoughts on the whole situation.
Who you think's
going to be the coach? Yeah, absolutely.
Coach too.
So like, comment, subscribe, all that. We will talk to you all next time. Yeah.
Quick wardrobe change and see you again.
You cut out. What'd you
quick wardrobe change, and then we'll start talking about the coaches.
And switch. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Planet Soccer Show. I'm your host, co-host, Reed Simpson, along with Dylan Wilcox.
I like how you always have to change it up there and say co-host like I'll care. until I start doing some of the editing, you can have the full host title if you want it. It's all yours.
But you're on every episode, so you're also a host. Dylan, today we're talking World Cup again. You know, even though the 2022 World Cup is over, the 2026 World Cup is going to be special. I don't know if it'll be able to top the on-field display of this World Cup. Hopefully so. But it's coming to the U.S. and Mexico and Canada in 2026. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the 2022 edition. I feel like there's still lots of positive soccer vibes going on in the country. So we're just going to roll with that and start talking about the way too early look at the 2026
Emphasis
World Cup.
On way too early.
Way too early. It's funny, a lot of media outlets will do like roster predictions here in the next month or so. All the major, whether it's Sky Sports in England or Fox or whoever, ESPN here, they'll do roster predictions for the next World Cup, and on average they probably will get 5, 6, 7 players right, maybe. Like for the US, for example, I would say 7-ish, maybe locks depending on health. But it is tough to look 4 years ahead, but we're going to do it because, like I said, it is coming to the United States. Dylan, I have a question for you right off the bat, because Greg Berhalter and his job security, or just the position of the head coach of the U.S. men's national team, is up in the air question wise. The question is in the air: whatever the wording is, who will lead the U.S. men's national team into the World Cup in 2026? And my first question to you is, knowing that the World Cup is coming to the U.S. and knowing kind of this young talent pool the U.S. has, on a scale of 1 to 100, how good or bad is the U.S. men's national team coaching job?
I'm going to go with a 72. My knee jerk was a 75, like a real solid C. But I knock it down a couple because I'm biased. I do think the World Cup being here is kind of a double-edged sword. It makes it a little bit more attractive because you'll have the attention and the support of the country and the federation, and probably a very high-paying gig if it's not Berhalter.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that comes with a lot of pressure as well. This is our golden generation. We saw how Belgium hired what everybody thought was the perfect manager for their golden generation, and it worked out far from that might be strong. I think they got a third place finish there, but below expectations. So there is that little bit of added pressure. Another possible positive is the potential that the U.S. is in Copa America in 2024, 5, whatever year it is, that we may be like invitational hosts or invitational guests. So that's just getting to play on that big of a stage in an additional tournament, because CONCACAF is just not quite the same as getting to compete in South America or in Europe. So it does kind of add some of that cachet that you'll get to likely participate in Copa America as well. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think normally the U.S. I'd say is like a 60 because we always underperform, but I think it is starting to gain a little traction because of everything surrounding the national team right now, whether it be the players or the future tournaments.
So for it to be, say, to get into the B range, what would we have to have differently going on right now? For you to give it an 80 grade, do we have to be contenders?
I think just more excitement around the team. Okay. Like, it's just not like that sexy, attractive job, because you're not going to get a fan base of American soccer fans. Sorry to all of our American soccer listeners, but we just aren't quite there yet. We don't quite have that national support and passion. So while financially we may be able to hang with the big dogs, it still isn't quite the same as, taking France to a final, that excitement around the nation. If the U.S. were to make a final, sure, there would be excitement, but that excitement is there at all times for France, no matter what, or like in England. I think that can be a double-edged sword because those jobs have that additional pressure, but I think when you make a move to international management, it's either at the beginning of your trying to blossom of your career and going to a smaller country, or if you start looking at the U.S. as it's kind of a capstone almost for some managers. It's like, this is my final task, and the U.S. just isn't going to attract that guy right now. That guy whose final task or final career goal is a World Cup. So we're just not quite there with that talent and excitement throughout the country at this point to be in that like B to A range.
Okay. Yeah. Your answer makes sense. I'm gonna say 80 grade, and I'll kind of give my reasons throughout this next portion of the conversation, which is discussing the names that could potentially be the manager for this next World Cup. And, I think it's important for our listeners to realize, I do think it's likely at this point that Greg Berhalter at least gets a little bit of an extension, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I guess I get it. Whatever. I would like to see the same coach lead the team in the Copa America and the World Cup, because it's a massive tournament to prepare for a massive tournament. But my gut tells me that Greg Berhalter is going to get a bit of an extension. However, I want to push back on you a little bit when you talk about international management is for people who are just starting out their career, kind of looking for that last sort of hurrah. I think in the last decade, it's become very much a let's take a deep breath, kind of refocus our career in a way. You see that with Spain. Luis Enriquez, is that right? Spain's manager. He's very much not finished on the club level. I think that's one example, and he's a tactical genius as far as possession goes and tiki taka. He's going to get a job in Spain or with a big European club. However, I think there are names out there that will probably go the international route that would also have a club spot kind of after that international run. You see a lot of these guys just do the international run for kind of one World Cup rounds. And I think we might see that if we get like a superstar coach for the U.S. And I don't think we will. I'll give you some names here in a second. And some of the names I've seen thrown out are, it's like, say TCU's coaching search gets going and Nick Saban's on the list. It feels like some of those names for the U.S. However, the points that I have read on some of these guys, and I'm teasing these names at this point, but some of the points are valid. One name is going to be Zinedine Zidane, and I do think he is the next France head coach. And we're not going to hire him over France if the French decide to go that route. However, he doesn't care about the pressure of coaching the U.S. in a U.S. World Cup. He's a multiple-time Champions League winner and probably the best midfielder of all time. So names like that, I don't think will feel that pressure necessarily, but we would have to throw a serious bag at him, and he would have to not get an offer.
And I think
from another country like
the names like that sexy, if you will. I think the U.S. is just not attractive enough, no matter what the money is. Like I don't think that's a career move that an all-time international player and now in his managerial career would take that in their eyes step down. Like I just don't think it is that attractive of a job. I think it's going to have to be for the U.S. We'll get into some more names, but either
Let's go ahead and start talking about him. Just say what you want to about Zidane. Let's go ahead and start getting into the candidates.
Zidane, in my opinion, I think that's just a ridiculous thought. I don't see us anywhere near that level of just on name alone. I think it's something we may try and explore. I just don't think somebody of that name and that cachet would even flirt with the idea of coming to the U.S. to coach the men's national team.
It's somebody you at least pick up the phone for because he doesn't have another job at this point. Like
make the call, just don't have high hopes.
Which is, yeah. Why it would work if we're talking about the positive sides of it. Why wouldn't it work? You think about his reputation, like he would command respect from the players, from the media. He wouldn't give a shit what the U.S. media would say about anything that he did. His in-game substitutions are absolutely stuff of a legend. Like if it's not going right for him, just look up some they might have to be in Spanish because they were some Real Madrid moves that he made, but you can translate the articles. Just hilarious commentary on some of his in-game, like throw paint at the wall, see if it dries, see if it sticks, sort of deal. I think the best part of him as a manager is and it's similar to the way he played, his flexibility. Like he's not tied to one system. He was able to play a 6, an 8, and a 10 in his time as a player. And I think with the midfield we have, that's really key. And, especially thinking about Gio Reyna, being able to incorporate these different skill sets that the U.S. will have in 2026 and even in the 2024 Copa America, it would be a home run hire.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a grand slam
Absolutely.
hire, not even a home run hire, without a doubt. But I mean, the likelihood is like 1 out of 10.
Right.
France would have to say, all right, Didier Deschamps, like, we're going to give you another
lifetime
shot
contract
at this next
almost.
round.
Otherwise I feel like it's a job that Zidane will kind of hang around for and not go to another national team. Even if they said, you don't get this cycle, you get the next one, I still don't necessarily see him taking an international gig. I think he kind of stayed unemployed here, obviously by choice, and it's been waiting for that France job. I would love it. I would be through the moon. I think you'd be silly to not love the thought of that. I just don't see it being something that we could pull off. And especially after the hiring decisions the U.S. has made in the past, I have no confidence that we could make a convincing enough pitch, even if we do pick up the phone.
Another name, kind of closing the book on Zidane, is Mauricio Pochettino. I think he's kind of as far as like recent, because Zidane hasn't been coaching for a couple years now, but Poch, this is his first year kind of unemployed, and he does have a system, contrary to Zidane, he does have kind of like his system that he runs, but it includes a number 10. And the things he was able to do with Dele Alli, making him one of the best players in the world, truly. I think I see him being able to do really, really good things with this U.S. midfield. However, I think he's one of the 2-ish front. Wait, they already said Gareth Southgate's coming back, right?
Well, for at least 2 years. I think it was like a 2 year, so it's not for sure for World Cup, but he's sticking around for a bit.
Pochettino wouldn't be an option if they extend Berhalter at all, because he will be back in coaching next year. And it will likely be at a pretty high club level. But I mean, he's on the record saying he's interested in an international job. And I think that this might just be the romanticism inside of me. But like when I look at the U.S. job, it's kind of similar to the way I look at Tottenham a little bit. It's like, if you're a manager looking for something to like elevate your status, win a trophy with Tottenham. Take the U.S. to the quarterfinals in a World Cup. Take them deep in the knockouts. It's like like Zidane, he's won the Champions League. He hasn't done international soccer, but if a coach has the sort of ego to want to elevate his status, you don't even have to win anything with the U.S. Just take them deep in a tournament on their home soil, and you're a legend, or win an FA Cup with Tottenham and you're a legend. So that's kind of the way I feel about some of these bigger names, which is why I still hold out hope.
Pochettino, I feel, is much more plausible to me because there is less like name behind it. I mean, Zidane's one of the best midfielders we've ever seen. The whole world, not even necessarily just the footballing world, like the whole sports world knows who he is. Pochettino is still he's a really good soccer coach. Like, we know who he is, but my buddies I was watching the game with yesterday have no idea who he is, I'm sure. So like I think purely on name recognition, that feels much more attainable. You can say what you will tactically if it kind of fits, because he does play such a distinct system, and it's very contrary to what we are currently employing. So how quickly can we make those changes? Will they work? Because we haven't seen this U.S. side do that. Like, I get all of those concerns, but purely from track record, he would excite me greatly. And what his system should be able to do with this current roster, when you look at the actual roster as itself, like if you gave me a Pochettino like system, I could have success in FIFA. So like it's not like it doesn't fit the players, it just doesn't fit what we've been doing. So it's the question of that transitionary period, I get. But for me, of like the really big names, he's probably my favorite.
Yeah. So the next one is a hire I would want to make just so Mexico doesn't get him. And that's Marcelo Gallardo, another Argentinian. After a hugely successful stint at River Plate, he stepped down. He wants to get back in or get into, I don't remember if he's had an international job before. But from what I've seen, he's at the top of the Mexico list, and he's also thought to be a pretty high on the list for the successor of Diego Simeone at Atletico Madrid. I don't know a whole lot about him as far as his style goes, but he's a person that would command respect, especially like on this side of the globe, the Western Hemisphere, especially in kind of the South American realm. He would be a good coach to go into Copa America with, to kind of maybe learn the team and see if he can do anything with that roster, to take them, however far in that tournament. But he's kind of a name that's an unknown and probably too adventurous of a hire for U.S. soccer. Do you have any thoughts on him?
I think it's just probably I agree. It's probably just a little ambitious hiring somebody who has never held any sort of international job or even high level club job. I understand for South America, certainly for Argentina, River is a phenomenal club, but we can do better. Well, I say that, and we're sitting here with Berhalter, so maybe he's a better option than Berhalter, but I also don't know if I'm ready for change for change's sake. I think there are some positives we've seen from Berhalter. So I don't necessarily know if change for change's sake leading into hosting Copa America likely and the World Cup kind of scares me. So I wouldn't want to do it unless it was a very clear, obvious, smart hire. And I think this is probably just a little too risky for me.
Yeah, and I think one thing that, just speaking in general to the sport as a whole, one thing that we probably don't even mention enough, I think I've tried to in the past, but it's the language barrier in this sport and the cultural barrier in this sport. I don't know if this guy speaks any English at all, which would be difficult coming into a side where, obviously you got players that play in Germany, that play in Spain, play in Italy, play in England. Well, England speaks English, but you know what I mean? It would just be difficult for a guy who's strictly been in Argentina his entire career, or Argentina and Spain his entire career, to come over and take control of a very much an American cultured program.
Yeah, I get that. I think leading into this World Cup, I probably would have agreed, but the job we saw Renard do in that halftime speech against Argentina in a completely different language that got translated, it's like, I think we can work through it. It's 2023 by the time it comes around. We can probably figure it out. It can be done. It can be done for players. From an outsider's perspective, it does feel weird because, imagine somebody walking into an NFL locker room speaking Spanish. Dudes would just not respond to it. But because the game is so global and so multicultural, I think players would be able to adapt. So that wouldn't be my number one fear about that hire, because we have seen more very noticeable success with guys who were complete mercenary, no culture, no language even of where they're coaching, and it kind of worked out a little bit.
Yeah. You mentioned Renard, and I put him on the list just because of kind of his recent reputation, but I don't see him. I mean, maybe he could mold the U.S. style into being able to maximize their talent, and he did such a good job with Saudi Arabia in that matchup against Argentina, but I don't think that's what we should be shooting for as far as okay, let's just game plan to beat this one team in group stage. And also Saudi Arabia's, I mean, we can't compete with that money.
He signed through 2027 and getting Saudi oil money. He's not going anywhere, but I've seen that name floated a bit.
Yeah.
And so that was a perfect little transition, I guess, to talking about him for a second. It's not going to happen. I somewhat have a bone to pick with the comment on we shouldn't plan to just beat a team in group stage, or we shouldn't plan to win ugly. Or I think as good as this generation is, I have no problem making a quarterfinal playing like Morocco if it gets me to a quarterfinal. We've seen that. I think we've the way seen Morocco that played, where teams don't play an attractive brand of football. I think the Moroccan team, their play style was not conducive to players looking good, but they have very highly talented players. But they played a system. It looked like they perfected a system. I don't know how, again, with how quickly he was hired before the tournament, but less afraid of system soccer than I would have been 2 or 3 years ago, because we finally see it have like long-standing success in a World Cup. Like we've seen like a Saudi Arabia nick a weird game against Argentina, like stuff not odds-wise hasn't happened before, but things like that have happened before, and we just haven't seen that be sustained throughout a tournament. But now that I've seen that, like, hey, whatever you have to do to get me out of the round of 16, I don't care how ugly it is. I just want to win, baby.
Yeah. A few other names here. I want to say this one just for the joke and because he's unemployed. Thomas Tuchel.
Oh my God.
Christian Pulisic would never play for the U.S. men's national team ever again. And that's
and we'll move on from that. We're not
getting
rid of the LeBron James of soccer. So sorry, Tommy boy.
Yeah. I kind of want to say Jesse Marsch for last, but I feel like we just need to talk about him at this point. He is probably the guy that people like you and me want, but also don't want to see him leave the Premier League.
I don't want him yet. He will coach the U.S. men's national team. He will.
So do you wait until after this, like, because 2026 will be most of these guys like age 25 season.
For sure. And I'm not saying I wouldn't want him if I were U.S. men's national team or U.S. Soccer Federation. Like he's the first guy I call if I'm getting rid of Berhalter.
Yeah.
The absolute first guy I call. You can say Zidane is more like, for me personally, and this is total like Homer Leeds USA hype boy in me, but like he's the first guy I call, no questions asked. But if I'm him, I don't take it. I almost think it's one of those where it is an odd time in his career to make that move. I think if he would have made that move prior to Leeds, sure. If he's been at Leeds 4 or 5 years and kept them up in the Premier League, sure. Or they get relegated this summer, like, then I'm all over it if I'm him. Like, I don't want to go coach the U.S. men's national team leading into 26, or do I coach in the championship? I'm going to go coach the U.S. men's national team. So I think that's the only way we get that. And I think that could be something that keeps us from knowing what we're going to do until April. Or like if Leeds is 8 points clear in April, they might announce a Berhalter extension. And if Leeds is in the relegation zone, we might not hear anything till May. Like I just kind of get that vibe. That's how I would kind of be handling this. And I'm also doing that with the understanding that doing that may make you miss out on the Roberto Martinez, the other bigger, the Zidanes, like the other bigger names. You may miss out on them because of that waiting. But I also don't fully hate Berhalter. And I like still feel weird and dirty saying that. But like I also am coming from a place where if I do have to move forward with Berhalter, I don't hate it. I would just rather Jesse Marsch.
Yeah. I think, the more time Berhalter gets with this group, I think the better he will be able to utilize the players he has. And I think I'm more on the fence now about Gio Reyna than I was before. Just kind of, I don't love that Berhalter like came out and said that, but the fact that his story's been corroborated a little bit, at least sort of the problems that Reyna was created, I'm like, dude's got to grow up. I mean, very similar to like what we saw with Weston McKennie. Yeah. And I believe that he can.
And Weston has.
I believe that he also can play on the wing. So with a player of that talent, like you can find a way to utilize him. I think even with McKennie, like you saw him progress the ball like as a number 8, and I think Gio Reyna can slip back a little bit and play more of a true center mid if that's what he has to do to fit the style. So that's kind of a tangent. You mentioned Roberto Martinez. He just wasted a golden generation, whether it was them just underperforming or not.
Yeah,
that's up for you to decide or the people listening to decide. I just think the momentum isn't really there with him right now, and I don't know if he would be inspired.
And I don't know if he would be inspiring either. Like, I think there would be just enough questions surrounding the hire at the start that it could be tough, despite how big of a name he is. It could be tough to really because frankly, we have some momentum right now. Like, yeah, the way we went out was ugly, but
Yeah.
like there is some momentum. There's certainly an excitement around the game in the country, and I think he would be just a questionable enough hire to kind of stunt that excitement for a little bit. So while tactically I've seen a lot of reasons why it would make sense and would work with this side, I think there's enough question marks that I don't think you have less question marks with him than you do moving forward with Berhalter. They're very different question marks, but again, that almost feels like a change for change sake. It's like, okay, we don't want Berhalter, and he's my fourth option. Is almost what that hire would feel like for me.
Yeah. What other names do you have on your list? I don't want to keep going on guys that we don't have a whole lot to say about. I mean, there's
the two.
There's the Rafael Benitez, the name out there, and I mean that system just does not work for me at all. It's like it's like a more conservative.
Yeah, that would
Berhalter.
be.
It just
that would be awful. The other similar level of Premier League experience is Bielsa, which I don't fire Berhalter for him, but again, he's one of those. If I'm not comfortable moving forward with Berhalter, I swing and miss on my first two. He's then a guy I'm calling. I think he does nothing to shore up our defense. I think you could say the same for Jesse Marsch. Understandably so. a lot of parallels there. And I think that would kind of be the question bringing him in. But we've seen how forward and aggressive and progressive and attacking of a system both of those managers play, and I think this team would lend well to that. So he's at least a guy I call, but again, he's not a guy that I'm calling under the table while still having Berhalter with risk of Berhalter finding out. Like, I'm not sold on him, but if we get to the point where we don't have Berhalter, I wouldn't hate that hire.
Yeah.
That also just feels like a FIFA one. That one doesn't even feel like something just feels weird about it. Like, I just couldn't ever picture it happening, so like I've kind of dismissed it.
Yeah.
But like it feels like it would work in like Football Manager and FIFA. Like, there's a lot of things that would make sense, but it just doesn't seem like it would ever actually happen.
Yeah. There's countless names out there. There's dozens upon dozens of big name soccer coaches out there in the world that are recognizable to people like me and Dylan, because we've seen them at certain clubs, then gotten fired or move on and it not work out. So there's always good coaches that are unemployed in this sport, and I feel like that's something that's so different compared to other sports, especially American sports. So the names are endless. If you want to do your own research, I feel like the coaching carousel of the U.S. men's national team has gotten enough media attention for casuals to kind of know, okay, the coach we have right now might not be the guy moving forward. And it will have a massive impact on the next hire or the next guy, whether it's Greg or somebody else, will have a huge impact on the future of U.S. soccer. Yeah.
So
at least whoever leads the team into the World Cup.
Just break the bank, go get Eddie Howe, make a semifinal. Sorry, Newcastle. I would turn in Newcastle success for a U.S. loss in the third place match. Like, sign me all the way up. Just go break the bank. He's the best coach in internet or in the world of soccer right now. Just go make it happen. I'll start the GoFundMe.
Okay. Yeah, go for it. I'm sure Newcastle's would love you.
Get blocked by everything.
Yeah. Dylan actually doesn't know this yet, but just with the way this episode's going, I've decided to break up the U.S. coaching search and the U.S. roster for 2026 into two different episodes because I just don't feel a natural transition. So 2 separate 30-minute episodes I feel like will work pretty well. We spent a lot of time, more time than I thought we would on the coaches. Again, guys, go do your own research, and it'll help you if you want to learn more about the sport. Look up these names, figure out what styles they play, and use that kind of as your avenue to learn about formations and styles of play and the way certain countries play, because Argentina plays very different from Italy. England plays very different from Spain, and you get that across the world. So this is part one of a part two or two-part series now, I guess. So go on and check out the discussion about the 2026 roster that will probably be out about the same time. We appreciate you guys listening. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, share, comment, and everything else. Talk to y'all soon.